Kaladin's like, it can be worse, guys. It can be. It can be a little bit worse. I could punch you in the gut.
I'm Stephen Pond.
And I'm Ben Jeppsen.
Welcome to The Next Ideal,
a Stormlight self-help podcast.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to The Next Ideal. We are talking about Chapter 14 today, Payday, where Kaladin finally rouses himself from his depressive episode and returns to responsibility.
It is literally the next chapter, but it is what we talk about when we have a new chapter in our life where, he was at this deep, dark place and then Syl helps bring him out and we see this exciting finish. Well, now we get to see what happens next. What is he going to do about this new resolve? The goosebumps that we felt at the end of the part one. This is an exciting start, although like many times when we want to start something new, we're kind of like reborn, so to speak. Maybe it's the New Year's resolutions or whatever. It doesn't start off as great as he hopes, right? Like he pushes against some resistance here. And that's real life. It's exciting and hard at the same time.
So Kaladin, he wakes up early in this chapter. He wakes up before any of the other bridgemen because they apparently have a habit of sleeping in because life sucks and you don't want to get out of bed. I see you.
Yes.
Bridgeman, I see you. But he wakes up early and he throws open the door, lets the sunlight into the barrack, and orders everybody to get up. And no one does. In fact, Moash specifically is the first person that he sort of targets. Moash rolls over to ignore him, and he hauls Moash up, punches him in the stomach, and throws him outside.
And then says, I'm going to do this to all y'all if you don't just get out of bed. And so I guess the only thing worse than waking up to bridge duty is waking up to a punch to the gut.
Right.
To bridge duty. Kaladin's like, it can be worse, guys. It can be. It can be a little bit worse. I could punch you in the gut.
Kaladin announces to the bridgemen that they're going to practice running a bridge. Because the reason why they're exhausted after doing a bridge run is not because it's hard, but because they're not training.
When they do these runs, you would think they'd be incredibly fit, but right, if it's inconsistent, and that's what it is, it's inconsistent. They're going sometimes daily, sometimes multiple days in between, and so their body is not into a rhythm, and they need to train to be more efficient and quick, because the faster you can get that bridge down, the fewer people are going to die.
Yep. But Gaz tells the bridgemen that Kaladin doesn't really have any authority over them. He can't force them to practice if they don't want to. And so they all go back in the barrack, and Kaladin does it anyway, which is the impressive thing. He doesn't have the rest of the crew to lift the entire bridge with him, but he goes and grabs an unfinished part of a bridge that has a handhold on it from the carpenters and starts running the bridge, starts running that piece of it, and runs for the rest of the morning, runs for several hours, practicing just back and forth in the lumberyard with this bridge.
In the context of the book, I see what he's doing, but I'm with the bridgeman here. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, why would you choose one of the few moments that we have to ourselves, and you're going to choose to run with a log essentially on your shoulder? Like, he's a special kind of crazy, it seems. But I do love what's happening here. One of the things that I researched this week in looking at this is leadership, because that's what Kaladin is doing, right? He is leading. And in moments of extreme threat, usually when somebody tells you what to do, you just do it, because our sympathetic nervous system is just on fire and we don't even know what to do. So if there's someone to give you a directive, you just do it. But here's the thing. They're not in immediate threat. This is their time off. They kind of have this protective myopia where they're like, I don't see the threat right now. Whereas Kaladin sees the long game. He sees, no, you are still bridgemen.
Yeah.
The same threat that faces you tomorrow, you face today, and we can do something about that. But because they don't feel that extreme threat, his orders, that direct central leadership that normally works when someone's under threat, doesn't work. They reach out to Gaz and they say, no, you can't command us what to do. And so now he's pivoting. He changes his approach. I love that line. I don't remember exactly what he says, but that authority is only given by those you govern, so to speak.
Yes.
And he's exhibiting something called transformational leadership. And that is when leaders transform us into something new. They help us change. If you've ever seen the movie Coach Carter, it's a great example of transformational leadership. And he wants them to see themselves as something different. He doesn't want them to see themselves as expendable or, as pawns. He wants them to see themselves as people who are worth saving and people who can survive, but they don't see that yet. So it's not going to work. So the first step of transformational leadership is idealized influence. You have to demonstrate that you're willing to do whatever they're asking you to do. You have to lead by example. You have to be a role model. That's the first step, and that's what he's doing.
The really impressive thing is that it's not just Kaladin saying, hey, get up and do this thing. It's Kaladin saying, hey, get up. We're going to do this thing. I can't force you, so if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do the thing. That's the really inspiring thing about Kaladin in this moment. And we see, just comparing him to the last chapter we had with Kaladin, where he was on a cliffside, literally, ready to step off. Now he's taking some really impressive initiative to impact not just his life, but the lives of those around him.
He is walking the walk, so to speak, right? And putting his money where his mouth is. In both cases, in literal situations, he is doing what he says needs to be done. It's hard work. He has to take a break, and people are making fun of him, but he bears the shame. He says, this is what matters. You will see. He makes this claim that's so audacious. I don't want to lose another member of Bridge 4. I don't want any more of you to die. I'm trying to imagine being in Bridge 4, and it's almost like that's a dangerous thing to hope for. Like, do I dare trust him? Do I dare believe that that's possible?
Especially with the reputation that Bridge 4 has.
Yeah.
But because they know Bridge 4 is the unlucky bridge. Kaladin claiming that, no, we're not going to lose anyone else is ridiculous. Not just from like a bridgeman's life standpoint, but from specifically Bridge 4, where they consider themselves the most unlucky of all of the bridge crews. That's where they have the most casualties. Saying you're not going to lose anyone else, it makes sense that everyone laughs at him.
There's a couple of interesting phenomena here that are happening that are very real for people who are in difficult situations, who are dealing with depression. And so another thing that we see here is this defensive pessimism. And this is something I could totally relate to. There are times when I am feeling down, and don't you dare try to cheer me up. Like, I don't want to see the bright side because I don't think it actually exists. I think it's a lie. It's very common where we get to this place where we feel so down that our pessimism is protective, even though from the outside people see it and they're like, don't you see how you're bringing yourself down? You're wallowing. But it's the armor for being an object, right? These bridgemen, we've talked about subjects and objects in previous episodes before, and these bridgemen are objects. So that defensive pessimism, that's the emotional armor for someone who feels like an object, because it protects them from that fragile hope, that fragile pottery of hope that just feels so scary. It's not apathy. It's a strategy to protect themselves from further pain.
I have felt that emotion, that defensive pessimism, pretty frequently before, where being negative and being like self-critical and down on yourself feels for some weird reason right. And trying to get out of that doesn't feel like it's worth the effort. One of the reasons why I love participating in this podcast is we've talked previously about how Kaladin's withdrawal into himself is a defensive, an adaptive approach, and defensive pessimism that's not wanting to hope for things because expectation leads to disappointment. And just talking about these things and framing them in this way makes me feel better about my own experiences. I'm realizing the things that I have done to approach my life in certain ways, with suicidal ideation that I've had, with depression, with all these maladaptive things. I'm realizing that these approaches have been not something to be ashamed of, but something that I have done in order to work through difficult things in life.
Absolutely.
It's not that I have been doing things wrong in how I have been approaching life, but I have been making adaptations that have been an attempt to serve me, that I now can recognize and adjust because I see there are other things that will serve me better. Just in talking about these things, I'm realizing I can remove the shame from previous decisions and therefore move forward in a better, more productive, more positive way. I really like this podcast, guys.
The insight that you're picking up on is really valuable, where too often when we hear about other ways to think or other solutions, when we hear about defensive pessimism or things, you're right that sometimes we get defensive about that as if there was another way to do it means that somehow I was wrong.
Yeah.
Right? No, these things are understandable. They make sense. Now, just because they make sense doesn't mean they serve you. But they are understandable and they make sense. So you're absolutely, I love when you say, I don't need to feel ashamed for having felt these things. They're normal reactions. They're not abnormal. They are normal reactions to these types of situations and this kind of pain. It doesn't mean that it's good for us, but it's not something to feel ashamed of. When we feel these things, these are human feelings. The hope then is just to first then be able to name it and recognize it for what it is, and now start taking small steps in another direction while acknowledging that this doesn't make me a bad person or a weak person or a wrong person.
Yeah, it's an understandable adaptive response.
Yes.
And recognizing that is a response that I'm having, I can now consciously shift that response.
Yes. It reminds me of when I was working at Fort Knox with active duty servicemen. And when they would come home with these severe symptoms of PTSD and they would feel so weak. These are huge dudes. And they're like, I can't believe I'm such a pansy that I can't sleep at night. And we would talk about what you're experiencing is not abnormal. Like we've departed from the phrase abnormal psychology. Like we don't have a class called abnormal psychology anymore at my university or most, because it's a misnomer. And what we would say is what you're experiencing is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Like you soldiers, you've been through something that nobody else has been through. And this is how humans adapt. As you said, it's an adaptive response, or it's an effort to adapt. Now, there are other ways that we're going to try and learn to respond with, but it's certainly not something to be ashamed of. It's understandable. It's an effort to cope. This reminds me of learning what empathy is when I was in my clinical training. Dr. Michael Day at Indiana University Southeast, he taught me a really powerful principle when I was working with a client that was engaging in lots of self-sabotage. And he said, the reason why you're struggling is because you're still looking at what's wrong with her behavior. Mm-hmm. You need to ask yourself, why do her behaviors make sense? You need to be willing to try and see, how is it a good move before you can start making any change? Because that's where you find empathy, is that understanding that, okay, I can see why you would respond this way. Like your response makes sense. Even if it's not helpful for you, this response makes sense. And it's hard to do that sometimes, mm-hmm. especially for ourselves, to be able to look at our own life and say, okay, no, these thoughts, I can see where I landed here. And I can see why these thoughts feel like they serve me, even though they don't.
That shift, that recognition is a really powerful thing that we see specifically in Kaladin here, that he's made that shift and he's approaching life differently. His situation as a bridgeman fundamentally has not changed in the last 10 hours of his life, right? He still is under constant threat of death. If he doesn't run a bridge, he will get strung up, right? Mm-hmm. That has not changed. But his approach, his use of his resources has changed. He's no longer internalizing and being that pessimistic, nihilistic person, but he's saying, these are the things I can do, and therefore I will do them. I can help these other guys do them too, and we will all improve together. They don't want to. I'm still going to work on me. And that's the impressive thing.
So again, coming back to that theme of objects and subjects, he's saying, no, I am a subject. I'm a subject under duress who has been enslaved, right? So there are limitations to the choices I can make. And so he's engaging in those. And if we're going to try to avoid the trap of defensive pessimism, the understandable trap, but what can we do to maybe either break out of it or protect against defensive pessimism and this myopia of just trying to just focus on what's right in front of me? Still helps connect them with purpose, right? That's that first step is saying, okay, now hang on. There are things that you value. And the best part of how she does this, and this is, a couple of chapters ago, I get it, but I think it's important because we understand better what he's doing, is she shifts his attention from the destination to the journey. Uh-huh. She says, okay, it sounds like they're going to die anyway. Let's not worry about the destination, but let's worry about how they get there.
Yeah.
What does it hurt to try one more time to help them if they're going to die anyway? And so this shift in attention from destination to journey is a really powerful psychological tool. It's a powerful mental health tool, because that usually defensive pessimism is focused on outcomes. It's focused on destination. It doesn't matter what I do, I will lose, or my life will be terrible. And so we're focused on destination. And so if we can change our focus and focus on a value, acceptance and commitment therapy is this powerful, we've talked about it. I've brought it up a few times in this podcast, and it talks about how values are like cardinal directions. In their writing, they explicitly say values are not destinations. It's like east. And if I start traveling east, I never arrive at east.
Right.
No matter where you go, east is still that way. It focuses on this idea of focusing on the steps you take to travel east. And so for Kaladin, it was, okay, my value, my cardinal direction, my east is protection. I am one who protects. I want to help protect these bridgemen. How do I do that? What is a small step I can do to do that? I can shine the sunlight in the barrack, and I can get them working out. I can get them fitter so that we can run faster, and maybe fewer of them will die. He's thinking, what are the steps of this journey towards protection that I can take?
What are the next ideals? What is the thing to strive for? Knowing that may not ever be a thing that can be accomplished, but that's the direction that you take. I love that.
I like you tying it back into ideals, because when you think of what an ideal, like the ideal is the perfect, right? And as imperfect human beings, we will never get to the ideal. And that's why it's like east. You never arrive there. Ideals are things that we take actions towards. And so if we can shift our attention towards what are value-driven actions that I can take right now. If you're having a hard time thinking about what you can do, simply ask yourself this: what is something I can do right now that future me 24 hours from now will be grateful for? Just one, what's a small thing? Like, there are so many things that I don't do that I put off because I think future me can handle it. And then future me resents past me, right? The second I think about that, I'm like, oh, yeah, there's that little thing that little chore that I just never do at home, that if I were to just do it, future me would be like, oh, I'm so glad that's done. Mm-hmm. They don't have to be big things. These small actions like Kaladin is doing. Okay, fine. Future Kaladin's going to be glad I ran this morning, because I will feel better when I run the bridge tomorrow.
Sanderson himself has talked about this in one of his book release speeches that he gives, where he talked about grinding in a video game, where you have to just do the tiny, annoying, menial things, kill thousands of rats in order to get the experience to be able to go up against the bigger bosses. And he said it in a specific way that I loved. He said, what is something that I wish, not something that I want to do, but something that I want to have done? And that shift of, like, in a video game, if I'm playing Dark Souls, I don't want to kill 2,000 rats to grind and get that experience, but I want to have done that.
Yes.
Shifting that focus of what's something that I want to have accomplished rather than what's something that I want to do, it puts it more into a value frame, because it's not a deed, it's an ideal.
And I think when we ask ourselves those questions, it's really important, again, to keep it broken down into small steps. 10 years ago, 15, 20, oh my gosh, I'm too old. I was about to say 10 years ago, I wanted to have completed my PhD, and then I realized I finished 11 years ago. So 20 years ago, I wanted to have finished a PhD. And if I heard this and said, okay, I want to have finished it, so go do a PhD, like, no way, that's 10 years in the making. That's a really long process. But when I was working on my dissertation, good advice that I got from my mentor was, listen, don't ever sit down and try to write your dissertation. Write 5 pages. And the nice thing was, by having an upper limit to how much I was going to accomplish, it gave me permission to release myself of the pressure of I should be working more. Every day I would write 5 pages. And once I'd done that, I could check off that I worked on my dissertation, because that's such a massive project. I could always feel like, well, I have spare time, I should work more on it. No, I did my 5 pages. And tomorrow I'll be glad that I wrote those 5 pages. So if we can keep that, what do I want to have done, on a small scale, because we're talking about dealing with defensive pessimism. That means we're already in a really difficult mental state, right? Like, I'm watching the Olympics right now, and I'm seeing all these incredible athletes who are doing amazing things. But when we're in a really difficult state like Kaladin and these bridgemen, okay, I can carry a board for an hour. I get up in the morning.
That's the important thing, is boiling it down to specific actions.
Yes.
Even like writing 5 pages might be huge. If you have a goal to write a novel, I'm on a lot of literary circles in my algorithm. And so Jancy Patterson talked about this in a recent Instagram reel, where the goal can be simply to write 100 words or open your document. And that's the goal, because that starts the momentum. And once you are able to get going by doing that small thing that can seem insurmountable sometimes because you know what it's connected to, but taking that first step, beginning that journey, can get you moving into everything else.
Again, like you said, that focus on the journey rather than the destination. It'll come.
Mm-hmm.
It'll come. But the focus is on the journey. And that's how we deal with defensive pessimism and myopia. Because when we're feeling that myopic, that's protective. These bridgemen didn't want to think about tomorrow. Thinking about tomorrow makes me anxious, makes me scared. I get it. And so focus on what I can do today without worrying too far in the future. Just focus on that journey. And that's what Kaladin is doing to try and help them transform into subjects, to focus on, you do have choices.
Yeah,
you do. And these choices matter. One of the things that I love in this chapter is towards the end, Kaladin's interaction with Gaz reveals how much he has changed from an object to a subject. In fact, he is very intentional that I am a subject now. I am not your object. Because he goes to collect his wages from Gaz. And Gaz gives him 4 chips and he's supposed to get 5. And he says, hang on, you owe me 1 more. And Gaz is saying, no, you said that was mine. Kaladin says, no, it is mine and I'm giving it to you. That difference. First off, Kaladin's like, Gaz, you need to know that. You need to know where this money is coming from. That it's not you just taking my wages, that I am giving it to you. You need to understand how this bribe works. But for Kaladin, it communicates something too. I am making this choice. This is not something that's happening by consequence. I'm not a boulder rolling down a hill anymore. And it's powerful. It's awesome.
You made a note in the outline for this episode saying autonomous effort is motivating. Controlled pressure burns us out. I love that phrase. Autonomous effort is motivating. And that's what Kaladin's doing, both with running the bridge, with getting the bridgeman up, with intentionally saying, no, this is mine. Now I give it to you. All of that is autonomous effort.
Yes.
That's Kaladin specifically, intentionally choosing to do things. And that is what can drive us to accomplish more.
100%. And that's what he's trying to help the bridgemen feel. All they have is controlled pressure. We do what we have to do. It's amazing just how rewarding it is when we make a choice to do a hard thing ourselves. The difference in practicing the piano because I want to play Fortnite versus practicing the piano because, you know what? I want to get better at this song. The nature of the practice is better. We're going to rehearse more. We're actually going to pay attention to what we're doing. But we also feel this sense of accomplishment because I did that for me.
In high school, I was in marching band all 4 years. And the marching band at my high school ran more than the football team. The beginning of every single rehearsal, during summer band, during fall band, we would run. Because the 4th of July parade in my city is, I want to say it's 4 or 5 miles of parade. Ooh. Hugely long parade.
Yeah.
And we march it in full wool marching band uniforms, carrying instruments that are sometimes 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds.
You get a contrabass up there. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I played a baritone. And so that was 20 pounds of instrument that I had to hold up in front of me. And my band director was very strict on making sure we've got our horn angles correct. So you can't let it droop. You got to get it up. He was very strict on making sure our marching form was accurate, getting our toes sky high while we're marching, making sure we're all in line. So we ran so much. Whenever we would do a longer run, we would run up the canyon next to our high school, we'd run up through the foothills. He would always say this. He said, there's something wholesome and honest about sweat. If you are sweating, that means you're doing something active. And if you're doing something active, you should be choosing to do that active something. That has stuck with me for the rest of my life. There's something wholesome and honest about sweat, about choosing to do a hard thing because you know it will be beneficial in the end. Marching these parades, so many other bands that we would see or like we would march next to or behind, when you get to the end of the parade, the crowd has sort of thinned out. No one's watching really anymore. That's where the floats are turning off and getting put away and everything. So many other bands would stop playing. They wouldn't
They'd walk it out.
They'd walk it out. They'd finish the parade, but it would be just like the drum line or something, or just them doing taps on snare. My band director, every single parade, we would play to the very end. We're playing song after song after song until we're basically getting on the bus. Because he always said that like the people at the end of the parade deserve just as good a performance as the people at the beginning.
I hear that.
And so he worked us to have consistent, stellar performances for the entirety of the thing. That had to be a personal, like physical commitment to work to be able to do that, to have the endurance to perform that task at the level that we wanted to be able to perform it required consistent effort and consistent practice. And that's exactly what we see Kaladin here. He's demanding his bridgemen, even though at this point they're not wanting to participate, but he's saying, this is how we will succeed, not having a single bridgeman lost. If you do this with me, this is how we will succeed. You don't want to do it, I'm still gonna do it. Because there's something wholesome and honest about sweat.
I love that. You know, I was a marcher as well. I marched in the drum line. I marched tenors, so I had those heavy drums hanging off my chest. But we did not run. That was when you said we used to go running. I'm like, man, that would have been really good. I don't think we ever had a 5-mile parade. We did do a pretty long one in Sun Valley, Idaho. And I remember I would get just terrible pain in my hip flexor right at the top of my legs as I'm trying to walk with those drums. And we were one of those bands that if there wasn't a crowd, they just let the drum do the cadence. Of course, I resented the horn players because I had to keep playing no matter what. That cadence never stopped. But no, I think that's a really great example of, especially I could see some of the marching band saying, we're not a cross country team. What does this have to do with marching? I got to ask though. So like, did you jog in step? Did he try to get you guys like do jog an 8 to the 5, you know?
No, not quite. There were accommodations that were made for some individuals.
Sure.
But when we were going on like a longer run, I don't think we would run in step necessarily, but I remember we did sometimes run while like singing the marching song.
Interesting.
What we're going to be performing. So we were jogging all together.
That's one thing that I never had to deal with on the drum line. I've always been impressed by is learning to manage your breath to be able to play those wind instruments.
And that was something in defense of the wind instruments. When we got to the end of the parades, often like for the bulk of the parade, you're doing song, cadence, right? Yeah. At the end of these parades, I remember multiple years, end of the 4th of July parade where it's thinning out. All the rest of the bands are stopping playing. Rather than doing song, cadence, it started to be song. We're not doing any cadences anymore because we had to focus on the thing that we were trying to accomplish. Allowing ourselves at that point to rest as the rest of the wind players would have been detrimental. That would have given us a break and let us let go.
Kind of like taking a couple of days off between bridge runs.
Hey.
That's exactly. And we're back. Sorry about that detour through some marching band geeking out, but that's exactly what Kaladin is pointing out, right? Like it's oftentimes this is actually another one of the hallmarks of severe depression, and the treatment for severe depression is we get to this point where we think that I just need to stay in bed. I don't have the energy. And maybe if I just sleep all day, I'll have the energy tomorrow. Something that I've said to clients multiple times is that our bodies are kind of like laptop batteries. The worst thing you can do to a laptop battery is keep it plugged in all the time, right? If you just keep it plugged in all the time, that battery life disappears. And similarly, our energy level, we generate energy through activity. We don't restore. Now, obviously, times where you have to recharge the battery and we do have to go to sleep. But if we spend our time plugged in to recharge, in other words, staying in bed all day, we don't generate more energy.
Yeah.
We actually sap it down. And so there are times where the first step, and I think we've talked about this before, is behavioral activation, which is just doing something and staying active so that those breaks don't become detrimental, so that the rests don't actually undermine our battery and limit its capacity.
The really awesome thing, looking back at my experience in marching band and these long parades, when we would go song, 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 and just removing the cadences, it got to the point where we'd hear like the roll off for the song right after performing the song already. And rather than being like, ugh, another one, got to the point, because of what we were doing in our training and our practice, of, oh, here's another one. Let's do this.
Let's go. Then when it comes to marching season and you're playing a 10 to 13 minute show, it's like a cross country runner running a 100-yard dash.
Yeah.
Surprise. There's a lot in this chapter here for things that we can see. Like we can see the perfectly natural and normal, understandable response of bridgemen who have been treated as objects. And so they're narrowing their perspective and feeling that defensive pessimism. But then we also see Kaladin as this good example who also needed help himself. I think that's a really important piece here. One other important piece to make is that Kaladin didn't snap out of it himself.
Yeah.
He's not now feeling optimistic and happy. That's another thing that sometimes, a myth that sometimes people who are feeling depressed think that I'm going to somehow just feel great all the time after this. No, he's still in a terrible situation and he still feels that despair. But he didn't come out of it himself. He had a friend who reached out to him. And that's where I think of this next step coin and the opportunity we have to reach out and notice our friends, notice those who need help them get connected, and to use this relationship that Nerd HQ has with Dragonsteel, helping people get connected, to talk to someone that won't cost them a thing, so that we can get past some of these other barriers to help and be that voice that helps people look at the journey. It's a really great program.
For you listeners, if you have a next step coin, if you've gotten one, whether you have gotten one for yourself or gotten one for someone else, leave us a comment. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing with your next step coins and what your commitments that you've made with that letter that Sanderson sends out with the coin. What's the commitment that you've made? If you've added anything to that commitment, rather than just taking the next step forward, are you doing anything else? Love to hear from listeners as to how these coins have affected your life.
We'd love to see comments under the YouTube video if you have them, and hear your thoughts and hear what you're doing to take the next step in your life.
I'd like to connect back to a previous episode real quick with what Kaladin is doing, especially when he's running this piece of a bridge on his own. There's a quote here: "Those stairs, stunned and hostile though they were part of what kept Kaladin going." Because at this point, he's running this part of a bridge back and forth in the lumberyard, and the bridgemen are astounded. The rest of, there are soldiers walking by that are confused at what he's doing. The carpenters are wondering, and specifically the bridgemen some of them are getting angry at him. How dare he exert himself when he doesn't have to? That makes us look bad, type of thing. But he also ran to work out his frustration, that boiling, churning pot of anger within. Anger at himself for failing Tien, anger at the Almighty for creating a world where some dined in luxury while others died carrying bridges. Kaladin is exhibiting that spiteful, defiant action that we talked about previously. He has something that he is working toward because he wants to prove other people wrong. I don't have to just be an object. You guys are being objects. I'm going to be a subject. And I'm going to prove it by running this bridge on my own time.
Isn't it funny how making himself a more effective bridge runner is in some ways an act of rebellion? Right? Because Sadeas, the soldiers, they want him to just be an object, right? They want him to be the tires that this army is going to roll on. And that's why the soldiers are resentful when he stands at attention as they cross the bridge. They're resentful at him having the audacity to make choices. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's an act of rebellion. It is defiant, spiteful motivation. It's not joy. We're not going to say he's spitefully happy, but he is spitefully purposeful.
Yes. And sometimes that is the only thing you can get, and that can be enough.
Yes, absolutely.
In this chapter, we also get a little bit more information about Syl, which is really fun. She is changing and developing, and Now she knows what death is and what lying is, and she's glad that Kaladin didn't lie to Gaz. It's so interesting here, where she wonders, like, what's happening to me? Kaladin says, what, does it matter? I don't know what I am either.
Mm-hmm.
A bridgeman, a surgeon, a soldier, a slave, those are all just labels. Inside, I'm me. A very different me than I was a year ago, but I can't worry about that, so I just keep moving and hope my feet take me where I need to go. That's a sentiment that we haven't seen from Kaladin.
No.
He was previously very concerned about labels, where he was Kaladin Stormblessed. He was Kaladin the squad leader. Then he was Kaladin the slave. The last chapter we had with him was Kaladin the bridgeman. He said specifically, I am no longer a soldier, I am a bridgeman. But here, he's saying, they're just labels. Inside, I'm me. Kaladin remains Kaladin, regardless of his circumstance. We change. The Kaladin that he is now is different than the Kaladin he was a year ago, absolutely. But he's still Kaladin, and he still can keep moving forward in that identity.
He's able to hold on to that identity because he's recaptured a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
I love, again, that his conclusion is a focus on, I'm not going to worry about the destination anymore. I'm just going to worry about the journey. I just keep moving and hope that my feet take me where I need to go, as long as it's me that I am being. You know, there's something really powerful about deciding that regardless of what my circumstances and what the people in those circumstances say about my worth, I am still me and I'm still worth living. I am still worth following my feet and actively living and finding a way to make whatever circumstances I'm in as good as I can make them.
And there's power in that. There's power in that choice. He is now more confident in his identity as Kaladin, which means he is able to trust those micro choices that he's making. He's able to say, I can do this because of who I am. I can get up and I can run this bridge on my own time because of who I am and where and the values that I hold.
What's interesting is along that same process where Kaladin is feeling more comfortable in his skin, even though he's in a terrible situation, is seeing Syl's anxiety about not knowing where she's going, but also not wanting to go back to where she was. Like, I think there was also a time where Kaladin, you know, he talks about being the descendant of someone better than himself, right? There was Captain Kaladin, and he's not the same as that, but he's a descendant with promise, which is kind of a cool idea, but there's still this focus on what I was something better.
Yeah.
Where Syl, it's like, I don't know where I'm going, but I don't want to go back to what I was. And there's this kind of existential crisis for her. I don't know what I'm becoming. And she's connecting herself to Kaladin, but doesn't know what that even really means. But seeing growth, it reminds me of adolescent development, right? Like as teenagers, you know, right around puberty, their brains develop in a way that allows them to imagine a world that's different than the one that they experience. And we call that this naive idealism, where they start to, because I can imagine this better world, it means that I know better. And she's like, this world is just becoming something so great and so much bigger, and I don't even know what it means.
In relation to that, though, like as we learn more about the world around us and grow and develop, we can have those moments like Syl has where she knows what sarcasm is. She knows what sarcasm is. So even as we grow and change and develop and go through sometimes terrible things, like knowing what death is kind of sucks.
Yes.
But she is still able to keep going and keep moving forward because there is an ideal. There is that better world that she can work toward.
Again, as she is figuring out what lies are and realizing, I think it's a good thing. So she's developing the sense of honor. And so that's becoming one of her cardinal directions. That's becoming her east, is I see now that there are things that matter to me, and that honor matters to me, and we need to keep moving in that direction.
So speaking of moving in that direction, Ben, do you have an ideal that you're going to be striving for?
Man, I've been thinking about it for like the last 10 minutes while we've been talking. Do you have one? Have you come up with one?
Yeah, actually. I want to emulate Kaladin in this moment of getting up and doing physical activity.
Okay.
I have run multiple marathons at this point. I think I've finished 2. I've run a bunch of half marathons, but I haven't gone running for the past 4 years, maybe 5. And I want to go on a run. I'm going to sweat and get that wholesome and honest sweat by going and doing some physical exertion because I choose to. I'm going to go running this week.
That's great. I'm going to take down some of my Christmas lights. Early in the episode, I mentioned that when I think about what is something that I would like to have done in Brandon's terms, the first thing that comes to mind is a strand of Christmas lights that I still haven't taken down around my deck. In Sioux Falls, it gets really cold and it's really windy. That's the real problem, actually, is it's the wind. It's not safe for me to go up on the ladder in windy conditions. And so I've taken down a lot of the Christmas lights, but I haven't taken them all down because fun fact about me, I love Christmas lights. I have a tree in the center of my backyard that we call the Tree of Life, and it's got, I think, 6,000 white lights on it.
Wow.
We're talking 12 to 15 hours of work here. And so I need to take things down when I can. But there's some lights around the fence around my deck that doesn't require any ladder, and there is no excuse why that hasn't been done. And it was the first thing I thought of when I thought of what's something that me 24 hours from now would like to look back and say, oh, I'm so glad that's done. I'm going to take those lights down. I'm going to do it.
Nice.
As simple as that seems, it's the little things. As simple as that will improve my well-being. It's a little thing. And just having that done will improve my life. Mm-hmm. It will take some pressure off and alleviate some of that stress.
So listeners, what is your next ideal from this episode? What's the thing that you want to have done, whether it's going for a run, taking down Christmas lights, or potentially leaving us a review on wherever you get your podcasts, because that will help us get this message out to as many people as it would be beneficial for. We really like what we're doing here. I love talking about this on this podcast, and I feel like this would be helpful to a lot of people. So if you know someone who would benefit from listening to this podcast, from reading The Way of Kings, from getting a Next Step coin, leave us a review. Share the podcast with someone you have thought of as you've been listening.
I know that that's something I would love for you to have done, is to leave a review. And along those lines of supporting the podcast, special thanks to Revel Replay for their subscription and support of the podcast. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
We'd love to have as many people as possible working toward those next ideals.